This conference will now be recorded.
Well, thanks everyone for having me on here. Just to introduce myself a little bit, I grew up on a farm here in Utah in a town of 800 people. My dad was a coal miner. That's kind of what most of the people do down in that area. And We had the farm on the side. Since leaving there, I've had the chance to work at several investment firms. Three of them have been not impact focused, but they're all based in here in Utah. Currently working at University Impact. Also spent 6 months working for a social enterprise in South America for recipients of microfinance loans. We would give them training and lower default rates for banks. I've been at University Impact for the last year and a half now. I do study at Brigham Young University. I study information systems. And University Impact does have ties and connections to Brigham Young University, but it's actually apart and separate from the university. We have associates from several schools that come and work at University Impact, and we drew lines between the university and the fund in order to do that. So I'm going to present a few things as well as share some insights that might be helpful for each of you. There's three points of that I want to cover as far as our mission is concerned. And first, it's to give the students a hands-on experience, to have impact within the students that come and work for University Impact. Second is to be a standard on how to do impact and philanthropy better. And third, to be a for-profit driven investment vehicle focusing on a lot of these problems. So we're going to talk about each of these, and as you have questions throughout, I'm fine to receive questions throughout. We'll also have time at the end to do questions. But if I'm missing something, no need to go to the end before you ask. So to get started, the organization structure of our fund is pretty simple and flat. So we have our board. One member of our board is also the managing director, and he oversees all the associates. Associates can come from any major. They can be freshmen, they can be seniors. If they're from a local university, they tend to be able to work with us for a lot longer, because to just logistically be able to attend our weekly meetings in person, the training is a lot easier to do in person. But each summer, we have associates from different schools come and participate with us. This is a paid position, and during the school year, we work 20 hours a week, and during the summer, or when we're not in school, we're working upwards of 40 hours a week. Our board, very talented and experienced. So some of these names I'll just mention. Jeff Woolley, he helped begin the Sorensen Impact Center at the University of Utah, and has done impact investing in several countries. Daniel Blake, who's the managing director, was an entrepreneur first from Brigham Young University. He exited his first company, sold it to a Fortune 500 company, and since then has done different entrepreneurial projects and has been at University Impact since it started. With the student experience, we break the work into three buckets. First, there's going to be investing projects that they're working on, which is all the deal sourcing, interacting with the entrepreneur, all of the due diligence. There's really nothing that goes on at University Impact that isn't done by an associate. The board reviews most of the information, but they don't do it for us. And I think that's an essential part of the experience. As far as consulting projects go, we present those to the fund as we come across opportunities, and we also have those accepted by the clients that we're offering consulting services for. Currently, for an example, I'm working on a consulting project for a very successful nonprofit out of Chicago that has a revenue generating branch within that nonprofit, and we're consulting them on whether it would be worthwhile to spin that out and seek VC money in order to really scale their impact with that portion of the nonprofit, or if it's better to keep it under the umbrella of the nonprofit and seek the more traditional source of donations and things that they're used to. We've done consulting projects for the United Nations World Food Program and other kind of larger organizations as well as these smaller ones or companies that we've looked to invest in. As far as research projects are concerned, those are for our benefit as well as sometimes we get requests to do these. For ourselves, we like to do them. It gives us understanding of a space. It helps us understand a problem really well as we look at different companies in the space, especially where our office is in Utah and we're making investments around the world. There are times when we've been given requests to do research projects. We've done a research project for the Utah legislature that led to a passing of a bill here and changing some of the agricultural laws in the state. This coming year, we're going to be doing two research projects for different committees in the United States House of Representatives on a federal level. We've also done research projects for limited partners that we have that are interested in specific issues and want to know that their money's going towards something that they really care about. With the student experience, like how it's going to be culture-wise, we get a lot of questions about that. The theory here is students have difficulty later in their careers taking on the risk of joining a social venture or being involved in nonprofits because they're unfamiliar with the space, or the smartest people have really good opportunities and the other paths are not as clearly paved for them. And so we've tried to give as much responsibility as possible to associates. That's why there's no senior associates and underlings of any way. Just anyone that shows up is going to be given a lot of responsibility and in real work, given a place to succeed and fail and learn from feedback from people who know what they're talking about, and be able to make all these mistakes early on. We have a high standard for quality of work, but at the same time, being able to make these mistakes early is going to help any student that leaves University Impact more capable of taking risks in the future that allow them to scale their impact in whatever they do in their career. And we feel that's really important. We hire students from different places. Yesterday, I interviewed 4 people from the University of Cape Town. We're expanding the number of universities we are recruiting from. So if you know of anyone that's interested in a summer experience with us, just have them go to our website. But that's really getting the best people we can to come work here helps not only the fund perform better, but it helps the overall student experience to interact with one another and be able to trust one another as they're meeting their deadlines. Stepping aside from the student experience and kind of what it's like to work there and how it affects us as students, we're going to talk a little bit about how we view impact. This is a huge question. Going to different conferences, talking to different groups, everyone has their own definition of what impact is. And I think that sometimes maybe it's because we're nice and we want to include as many people under the impact umbrella as possible. And I think that's good in some ways, but also makes it really ambiguous. So most organizations, even in impact investing, have to create their own definitions of impact and how they approach it. We use several different frameworks to look at this. I'm going to show a couple of those. The first is this impact investing spectrum. On the far right, we have traditional investing, focused on profit, don't really care as much about impact. On the far left, you have grant makers who are seeking a negative return on their money. They don't care about the return, but they really care about the impact. We find ourselves right in the middle. We fall probably more on the market rate return side, but we do spend just as much time in our due diligence process digging apart and looking at the pieces of the impact. And we've looked at companies that would be great investments, but aren't meeting our standard of impact, so we pass. So we feel that people should know where they are on the spectrum and kind of play in their space. And so we try not to venture too far one way or the other, just because we feel that there's plenty of need here that we could participate in. Another way we look at it is using the UN framework for defining impact with just their sustainability goals. We like this because associates are coming and going all the time. A lot of them have a passion associated with maybe one or two of these, or experience maybe in one or two of these, but we want to make sure that we are not only looking at impact in concerning poverty or concerning food. Where we're looking at companies all across the world, we use this as a way to make sure that we're considering the priorities of the globe, and we're not missing on some of these opportunities. We have to look at it a little bit differently with these sustainability goals, depending on where they lie and in the context they're in. With the individual, it's really easy to see, oh, this is how it affects one person, really easy to measure. It's really deep impact typically. But we also have looked at deals that are less deep on an individual basis, but have some breadth to them. They affect a lot of people, even if it's only in a small way. We also find that impactful just depending on the case that we're looking at. This framework is really interesting, and we do this one on every single deal we look at, where we break down the impact and the theory of the organization to be able to measure it. We use this as well as a tracking methodology after investment. I'll give an example of how this kind of works. So let's say that the social problem is malaria. Number of people dying of malaria each year. One possible theory of change could be by selling mosquito nets, we can reduce the number of people dying of malaria. So the intervention would be the activities involved, buying mosquito nets, shipping them, having distribution channels, how the actual business is the intervention. And then when we get to tracking, we track it differently and we categorize what we're tracking there. So outputs for this operation would be the number of mosquito nets sold in what areas. Really easy to track. Most businesses, doesn't matter if you're impact focused or not, are tracking their outputs, what they're producing, what they're selling, how much they're selling them for. Outcomes is where we see even social enterprises miss this a little bit, and some of them track it, the better ones do, and some of them work with us and we try to coach them through it. But that's where we start to connect the outputs to back again to the social problem, and we say, okay, now that we've sold 10,000 mosquito nets, how can we, in a creative way, determine if the number of people getting sick or dying of malaria goes down? And that's where organizations have to go outside of themselves a little bit to track that data. They have to, gather data from hospitals or from other organizations that are tracking this and compare that to their own efforts. Impact, as our third tier, would be the percent of decrease in malaria deaths or illnesses that can be attributed to the outputs of this intervention. So maybe there's other players that actually had a bigger impact than selling mosquito nets, or maybe there was somebody else giving away mosquito nets for free, whereas we were selling them. And there's lots of things to consider there, but we typically stop at the outcomes portion, just because impact, the percent, the attrition there is really hard to prove. And but we do think about that and think about the other players in the space as we look at this theory of change. This has been helpful for, as we've worked with nonprofits, anyone really that cares about the issue they're working with. There's a lot of questions we can ask here that give insightful responses and help us to determine if we like the company or not. Here's some other considerations we have. I won't spend a ton of time there. But as moving on to this third portion of our mission, I'm going to talk a little bit more about how we're structured as a fund financially, what we look for as far as our financial returns, and how we go about that process. So we're a traditional VC as far as structure is concerned, and with LPs as you would expect at a VC fund. Recently, we've actually added to our fund with some DAFs. These are donors advised funds that we essentially we're using as evergreen funds where we invest the capital and any returns we get will then be reinvested. We still charge management fees on those to fund our operations, but we don't have to give that money back to LPs. We're looking at some other sources as well, but not going to get into that too much. We're a seed stage investor. We look at $50,000 to $500,000 check size for initial investment. We've already followed on one of those companies that we've invested in, so we invest more after that. We're okay to be patient. We're okay to follow or lead in a round. And we've done both debt and equity investments so far. So you'll see we're committed to our stage for the most part, but as far as the size of the investment or even how the deal actually looks, we're small enough that we can be creative, and we think that's important, especially in the emerging markets or with unique solutions to problems. There's going to be at this early stage a lot of questions that have to be answered, and we want to make sure that we're giving the right structure to the deals we're working with. As far as what we define as seed stage, they just need to really be able to show evidence of the true market pain point, post product. That we don't like to fund R&D typically. We like to fund businesses. They need to be able to show us traction. It doesn't have to be revenue. It could be other ways, but should be significant enough to catch our attention. And obviously the management team, as any VC would point out. We start by sourcing. We just reach out through either finding partners in other countries, attending conferences. We fly our associates out to conferences frequently. We have specific vertical focused sourcing that we do as well. Once we find a company, we've had a call with the entrepreneur. We do a deal screen, which is just really high level. We go over it in 15 minutes as a group and look at a company and determine if it's worth pursuing or digging deeper into. We spend more than 15 minutes working on the deal screen, but just the conversation is a fun about it. If it's worth moving forward, we perform a full due diligence process. We get a data room. We do all those things, the financial analysis, the impact analysis, in preparation to present to the investment committee, who takes our recommendation. They vote, and we move forward with legal due diligence post the investment committee. That legal due diligence is really the only part the associates don't do. That's contracted out, obviously, with the lawyers. So in 2018, we did make 3 investments. After looking and doing deal screens on 200 companies, we made 3 investments. One on a water filtration company in Central America, an ag sourcing company in Kenya, and then a food tech company here in the U.S. They've still only been a few months in some of these, and so haven't been able to gather good data as far as the impact of our money yet. But we've been really pleased with the progress of our investments so far. With looking at how our impact is in our own outputs last year, we had 33 student associates throughout the year come from 4 different universities, did 200 deal screens, 45 memos, 3 investments, 12 research reports, and 9 consulting projects. So we consider it a successful year. And when you think about the immensity of work and the number of hours here, that is, we feel that's been super impactful for our associates. Many of them have gone on to work at bigger, prestigious firms. One is going to Bain, one's going to Morgan Stanley. So a lot of them haven't graduated yet and are still determining their path. But that's kind of us. Are there any questions that I could answer?
Hi, Cash. This is Susanna. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Can you talk a little bit about your funding source? Do you charge investors fees? I'm just wondering. It's a lot of analysts and a lot of travel, so I'm wondering how you fund the research.
Right. So we do charge a management fee. It's really nice when you hire 14 associates. It's still less than that are students. It's still less than a salary of a VC associate at a typical VC firm. I mean, we're paid hourly because we're inexperienced and we're receiving training and other forms of benefit. They don't pay us as much as they would a typical associate, so that helps a lot. But the management fee we charge on the funds we have is typical to a VC.
Got it. And then is it the directors that provide input and oversight, or do you have other sort of industry contacts or mentors, especially for like certain projects might require some fairly technical input? How do you get input from professionals?
Part of the training we get is how to seek that out ourselves. Every project is going to be different on who we want to talk to, and it falls on the associate to put the feelers out, get in contact with people. Luckily, we do have a strong network through our board, but we go to enough conferences and we've got a good pipeline of partners in different countries that typically it only takes us a few days to get in contact with somebody that we need to talk to in a country where we're looking at an investment. As far as the training itself, that is headed up by some of the associates that have been there longer. I've been there since we started in January 2018. So that's done internally as far as the training material. We get a lot of that from some of the things at the Ballard Center at BYU has been teaching some of these things for years. Some of it's proprietary to us. I don't know if that answers your question completely,
Yeah,
but
no, it does.
we have a full pipeline there.
Great program.
Hi, Cash. This is Arena. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay, so I recently joined IEN. Thanks so much for your presentation. Really impressive. So I, of course, had my gender lens on when I saw the board, who was being represented on the board. And I wonder how they're selected, and have you thought about, not just gender lens, but just diversity as well? Have you thought about, board diversity in the future?
As far as the board is concerned, I wasn't obviously involved in the decision-making process for that, so I can't speak to that completely. I do know that our board is very talented. We look at everything as well with a gender lens. That's one of the frameworks we use in the impact analysis. As far as associates go, we've had several women come through. I don't know if it's I don't know if I can answer the question on the board specifically, but as far as sourcing associates and including everyone we can, we've done specific campaigns and programs at campuses and universities where there are more female students, trying to get more females to apply, as well as branching out into other universities in other countries. We've had associates from Nigeria, Colombia. Most of these associates we have speak a second language, which I think is really unique. I speak Spanish, for example. So that's kind of how we're seeking to do that, and we do care about it. And you're not the first person to ask either, so I appreciate the question.
Yeah, thanks so much. Very impressive.
And Josh, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about how the idea came about for having students from other schools come to BYU for the summer, and how that experience is structured and ties into the school year.
Well, there's a couple reasons for it. Some of our board members have helped start student-run funds at other schools, and there's a lot of red tape that comes from being tied to a university. we have great relationships with BYU. We source a lot of associates through there. We work closely with some of the people in the Ballard Center there at BYU. But by separating ourselves, we're able to be truly a for-profit organization. We're able to have more freedom in how we operate without approvals, and we can move more quickly. So that's from an organizational standpoint, that's why. Second of all, if we're going to really invest in companies around the world, we need to have people involved from around the world. We need to have the smartest people from around the world. And we also want associates that leave University Impact to go start companies in different parts of the world and potentially maybe even seek investment from us one day. If they're trained to, let's sort of like last year, an associate looked at 200 companies in different parts of the world. This associate moves to a part of the world, works on their own startup of some kind. They're going to be much more prepared to seek funding from somebody like us than they would have been. So a lot of those things have come into play. And I think, where most of our associates, even that are at Brigham Young University, have lived in another country for several months or years, we care about that. And it's worked out well for us so far.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Kesh. This is Aslı from Bryant University. So this was an amazing presentation. Thank you. And I have a more operational question. So if a student, let's say, comes from Harvard for summer, and then he or she stays for another 6-7 months, so that, she or he works for the full year, and then do you have opportunity for students to continue working, let's say from Boston, from other parts of the world, continuously for several years?
So that's one problem we're trying to address right now. So everyone that's working at University Impact, we like them to be in office. So if they're visiting from other universities, it's typically during breaks between semesters, and they work full time and then they return back, and we remain in contact, but they're not necessarily working for the fund. It's just really important to have, and it affects the quality of our work, to be quite frank, when we're all in the same room working in the same office. Mm-hmm. But this summer we're testing something, and we are sending 2 or 3 associates to work with a partner seed stage investor in Africa, in Zambia. So we're sending 2 of our associates somewhere else to see how that works. We found that a little bit easier to send somebody that we already have that's highly trained and kind of knows how we work somewhere else to see if we can do remote stuff before we try to give somebody that's already at a distance a chance to do that.
Have you considered branching out to several offices in the US, like one in Boston, I don't know, one in San Francisco?
Yes, that's definitely in the talks. I couldn't give you more information on the progress of that, just as far as timeline, but that's been in the vision from the beginning.
Great. Yeah, congratulations. That's pretty amazing what you are doing.
Thank you.